So they compare these two groups, and every single randomized controlled trial, a gold standard in medical research, has demonstrated that people who do alternate daily fasting burn more body fat, maintain more lean mass, and see no clinically significant change in the resting metabolic rate. Versus every study has demonstrated with these alternate daily fasts that in this group, the calorie restriction, they burn less body fat, they preserve less lean mass, and they see a clinically significant reduction in their resting metabolic rate. And the big difference is because, when we're fasting, we do get these counter-regulatory hormones produced. So when we do the 24, the 36, these alternate daily fasts, these more intensive fasts, we get these great things happening that we don't get during just sort of the time restricted eating, the 16-8 or the 18-6 approaches. So that's really, sort of what distinguishes the two, and is this counter-regulatory hormones.
Welcome to I Think I Can podcast. My name is Luella Young. I am a woman who believes that we, like wine, get better with age. Age brings us wisdom, intuition, and a level of sophistication that is beyond the reach of youth. I am here to tell you that living a luxuriously rich and fulfilling life is in your reach. I Think I Can podcast will teach you to think differently in order to get different results. Allow me to show you how to do life effortlessly. This podcast is for the woman who is tired of playing by the rules of society, community, religion, parents, and partners. I Think I Can is all about becoming brave, authentic, purposeful, and strong. Listen weekly and you will find yourself living a life you could have only once dreamed of. Thoughts drive our physiology, so channel your thoughts with me into a life truly worth living. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to I Think I Can podcast. I am thrilled to have Megan Ramos here with us today. She is I have to get your credentials correct here, but and I like this, a therapeutic fasting expert. I love that. She is also, of course, Canadian and a clinical educator and expert on therapeutic fasting and low carbohydrate diets. She's guided more than 14,000 people worldwide doing this. And she's also the co-author of the New York Times Bestseller Life in the Fasting Lane. And that's with Dr. Jason Fung, with a name that you probably have all heard if you're into intermittent fasting at all. So welcome, Megan.
Oh, thank you for having me on today, Luella.
Well, it's absolute pleasure. So one of the first questions, and I love the fact that, obviously you're just interviewing a woman on fasting. This is one of the first times I've done this. And so I love picking your brain. I think, for me, when I was, I tried intermittent fasting and I found it to be very effective, but I guess a little bit concerned about restriction and what restriction can do for your metabolism, what restriction can do for putting stress on your body, and how this would affect women, especially because of our cycles. So my first question to you is, do you feel like fasting is a healthy weight loss tool for women?
Absolutely. I started
Okay.
fasting myself about 12 years ago, and I've experienced nothing but incredible health benefits. And the majority of the women people that I have helped have been women, over 70% of them.
Okay. Okay. So I'm guessing that you would never recommend this for a woman that has, well, like, I mean, are you talking about like just type 2 diabetes? Like, I mean, that's the main like population of people you treat, right? At the clinic, like in Toronto, like it's mainly type 2 diabetes,
Well,
or no?
we're primarily we're all online now, but we work with
Okay.
people with metabolic syndrome. So metabolic
Yeah.
syndrome just isn't type 2 diabetes. It's also conditions like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and polycystic ovarian syndrome. So the methodology or behind our fasting are really, our objective with fasting is to treat insulin resistance. So people with metabolic syndrome have these toxic levels of insulin within their body that create different diseases in the metabolic health field. So sometimes it's type 2 diabetes, or maybe it's PCOS, which is like diabetes of the ovaries for women in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So we work with people that have insulin issues. So in terms of, say, a cycling woman
Mm-hmm.
that comes in, if they've got PCOS, we've got to treat that first. We've got to treat the underlying insulin issues first, or they're not going to have a regular cycle. They're not going to have a healthy endometrium lining.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have struggles. So, for a completely normal, healthy, functioning woman, it's not ideal to fast every week of the cycle, especially if fertility is the goal. I'm trying to get pregnant right now, and
Mm-hmm.
I definitely am not embarking in any longer fasts. But when that's not even on the table because of PCOS, for example, we've got to treat the PCOS first. So, say a 24-year-old woman came in, she's got PCOS, she hasn't had a period in 2 years, 2 or 3 years. She's now getting engaged, thinking about the future and starting a family down the road, wants to get settled into her career first, and is just concerned. Um, Even though she is quote unquote cycling woman, the
Mm-hmm.
cycle is just not there. The insulin's too problematic. So we do what we call therapeutic fasting protocols that are a little intensive with these women. But the beauty is within 3 to 4 months, they start having normal periods. We see it all of the time. These women who haven't had menstrual cycles 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 years, or maybe never even have because they had PCOS so young. I mean, I was diagnosed with PCOS when I was 14, and I started cycling just before I was 10. So I had it much younger, because a woman should not be cycling, around 10. They should be
Mm-hmm.
cycling maybe early as 12, but 12 to 14.
Yeah.
So with these women that have had these long-standing histories of PCOS, like, forget the other stuff. Let's
Yeah.
fix the first problem, the problem that's preventing us from getting to the other stuff. So we will do these therapeutic protocols, and 3, 4 months, they're getting regular periods. They're not having crazy symptoms of PCOS. Their periods start to normalize. And we continue with a more therapeutic approach until everything has normalized, until all of the blood markers like the LH to FSH ratio look good, the progesterone levels are up where they need to be. If testosterone was elevated in certain cases, that is not. If DHEA was elevated in certain cases, that is not. When all of those blood markers get better, we're seeing good endometrial lining growth throughout the cycle around ovulation. We're starting to see normal ovulation, not the presence of polycystic ovaries. Then we'll start to scale back, and then we can focus on the fertility stuff. So for a woman that is cycling, we have these two phases to our cycle. We have the follicular phase, which starts on day 1 of our period and it ends at ovulation. And then we have the luteal phase, which ovulation kicks off and ends when our period starts. So in a perfect textbook world, women tend to have 28-day cycles. So this follicular phase is 2 weeks. And then this luteal phase is 2 weeks from day 15 to day 28. During these periods, these two phases, different sex hormones are dominant. So during the first phase, we have very elevated estrogen levels, and our progesterone level and our testosterone level are quite suppressed compared to our estrogen level. And then in the second phase of our cycle, our estrogen is very low and our progesterone is dominant, and our testosterone is a bit elevated. And these sex hormones actually have different effects on our appetite. So estrogen is a very appetite suppressing hormone, whereas progesterone is a very appetite stimulating hormone. And there's a reason for that. We need to eat to produce progesterone in certain quantities, and even eating some healthy carbohydrates like tubers and can help boost progesterone levels. But we need that progesterone to help, an egg or a fertilized egg, an embryo, implant in the uterus. So what we tend to see with a lot of women nowadays, especially those with PCOS, they have very low progesterone levels. They're not really able to produce it later on in the cycle. So this is where I think a lot of the hesitation of fasting comes in. Well, if you fast, you're restricting the nutrients and the certain things that are required to elevate progesterone. Well, in the case of someone with aggressive PCOS, I mean, it's never going to happen because of the insulin anyways. If you're eating and you're doing a heavy carb diet, to try to spike progesterone, you're just going to be spiking the insulin, and that's not even going to let you. It's like preventing you from fixing that. So we do tackle it pretty aggressively, but then we get this healthy woman who wants to be a mom. So this is my journey, because I started off with PCOS and I tackled the insulin. I did 2 42-hour fasts and 1 24-hour fast a week for 6 months, lost 60 pounds, reversed all of my abnormal PCOS markers, got rid of fatty liver, got rid of type 2 diabetes. And then after that, it's like, okay, I'm healthy now. I'm married to this cool guy, want to have babies with him. Well, there was some chaos. So that was, 31. This is 38 now. And I'm trying to have a family. So, during this progesterone phase of the cycle, I focus more on time restricted eating, more on a nutrient dense diet, getting in good, healthy fats, getting in a good amount of protein, enjoying good, complex carbohydrates, like some sweet potatoes, but I never sit down and eat a whole sweet potato by itself. I'll eat it with the fiber. I'll eat it with other leafy greens and Brussels sprouts and a nice piece of fish. So I'm eating it with a lot of fat and fiber and protein. And I enjoy those foods, and those are all can help promote progesterone. So now my approach has changed. A lot of cycling women, they struggle with fasting in the second part of their cycle because of this, because of the need for progesterone in the body and cravings being elevated as a result of it. So, but we've got to get the woman healthy first before that's even an option on the table. And when someone is done, though, so say I have a 44-year-old woman who's still cycling, hasn't entered perimenopause yet, who has had her kids, is not looking to have more kids. Is it safe to fast during all parts of the cycle? And the answer is yes. They just might struggle more during the second part of their cycle. So when those first 2 weeks of the cycle, when the estrogen is good, is high, is dominant, then the appetite's naturally going to be suppressed. So a lot of women don't understand why some weeks it's so easy to fast and some weeks it's so difficult to fast, and the cravings are crazy. And that has a lot to do with our own hormonal cycles. When we don't necessarily worry about even micro changes in progesterone for these women that aren't looking for fertility so much. So we will fast them during weeks 3 and 4 of their cycle, so long as they feel well, but they just can't fast as much. So maybe it's some shorter 24-hour fast, 16 or 18-hour fasts. They usually find that to be a lot easier. So we have to teach them about these ebbs and flows with their cycles so they don't inflict a lot of self-blame. I think a lot of women have these really long histories of dieting, and we know that most of the diets are all based on calories in, calories out. They're just packaged differently, right? Like you've got points, you've got calories that you track, points that you track, fish diets, different types of juice diets, smoothie diets, meal replacement stuff, but it's all based on calories in, calories out, and it just doesn't work. So there's a lot of trauma, I think, that, many
Yeah.
women start dieting in, elementary school or middle school. So we try to teach them that this is not the fasting during this particular phase of your cycle is difficult hormonally. It's not that you lack willpower or that you're a failure at this.
Hmm.
That's we got to put the negative self-talk on away. There's
Yeah.
no place for that. So when fertility is not a concern, I think I shared with you that we're trying to save some embryos because I started cycling so early. My egg reserve is low, and I'm trying to start a family a little bit later in life than. Well, I don't know if it's that much later in life these days,
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
but 20 years ago it would have been a little bit later in life than women at the time. So I'm 38. So we're trying just to bank embryos because I don't have too many eggs, but I got good healthy eggs.
Hmm.
Um, so what we're trying to do is get these embryos, and there's just so many hormone changes, and sometimes I feel like I'm forcing myself to eat. And during my last egg retrieval cycle, I just couldn't for a couple of days. I just couldn't. But my levels, I'm having my blood work checked almost every day at this
Hmm.
point. But my hormone levels, my progesterone stayed very good, even though I felt like if I was going to force myself to eat, I would be nauseous just because my appetite was so suppressed from I had all of these eggs producing all of this estrogen, but my progesterone was still very, very good. So, we do have a ton of women that we work with for PCOS. So we have this one naturopath on our team, Dr. Nadia Pataguana. She co-authored the PCOS plan with Dr. Fung, and we
Mm.
jokingly call her our baby whisperer. And the majority of the clients that she sees, not all, she sees women of all ages, but she calls her baby whisperer because a lot of women will come to her for PCOS.
Yeah.
They've tried 3 rounds of IVF and it hasn't worked. Not at all. They can't get any eggs, or like they get a egg and it doesn't take. And so they come to her, they don't have these regular cycles, and in 6 months the majority of them get pregnant naturally after having these years and years of issues.
Wow.
And these women are fasting quite aggressively because we're trying to treat the PCOS. We're not
Yeah.
even thinking
Yeah.
fertility is on the back burner
Yeah.
right now, but they're still getting pregnant despite doing these longer fasting. So
Yeah.
does fasting really affect the progesterone that much? Is it really that problematic, or is the insulin a little bit more problematic?
Yeah.
So I question that. So even when it comes to
Hmm.
my own journey, if I don't feel like eating, I'm really not forcing it, and I'm not noticing any hormone changes. Just like with the women that we're treating with PCOS, we're just seeing the progesterone go up and up as we treat the insulin levels, anyways, and they're getting pregnant and they're having very healthy pregnancies and very healthy babies at the end of the day. So,
Okay.
um, yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah. So now I have a few questions. So when I asked you about intermittent fasting, I think I was thinking, the daily thing that I see a lot of people doing now. It's sort of, well, every single day I don't start eating until about 1 or 2 p.m. and I close my window of eating at 8 or something like that, but every single day, let's say they're doing it. And whereas I know I've spoken to a lot of naturopathic doctors, and they say, well, it's really important to get, like, first of all, breakfast in, because it's just energy for your brain. And also it tells the body, that you got more than enough reserve, like, and we don't want to spike your cortisol, like, let's say these high strung type A women that are trying to do everything. They were sort of warning me against it. So what's your take on that? Like, first of
Well,
all, should it be done every day, and every day the same, like, hour of eating windows, and then the whole breakfast thing?
yeah, I don't really know where the whole breakfast thing comes from. I'm going to touch base on that first because
Okay.
throughout human history, we didn't have caveman refrigerators or caveman cupboards to pull out our caveman cereal or cavewoman cereal or person cereal. I mean, I was living in Toronto at the time. I live in California now. I
Mm.
was doing an interview in February from Toronto with a woman in Dallas who is a born and raised Texan from Dallas. So much nicer weather in February than in Toronto. And she's asking me about this breakfast thing. And I look outside the window. Like we know people inhabited Toronto area in Canada. I mean,
Yeah.
it just wasn't this blank, empty land. You know,
Yeah.
but people had to fast. Like we didn't wake up. We have these storage and retrieval
Mm.
systems. So it's kind of, really silly to me and mind blowing to me
Mm.
that we're telling people that they need to eat breakfast for this energy in the morning. We have these
Mm.
retrieval mechanisms, and diabetics are the ones that know this the best because their blood sugar levels are the highest in the morning. Even if they have
Mm.
fasted the whole day the day before, their blood sugar levels are the highest in the morning, are
Mm.
part of our wake up process. About a few hours before we wake up, our internal engines turn on to start to get the fluids running. Our
Well,
cortisol levels go up.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
this noradrenaline causes our liver to spill out fuel in the first place. So diabetics say,
Hmm.
hey, my blood sugar is high in the morning. So our bodies are already designed to give us that fuel in the morning. We haven't had access to it throughout human history. In
Hmm.
terms of your questions about the popular 14, 16, and 18 hours of daily fasting, you'll see the 16-8 or the 18-6 diet on a lot of magazines. And this is usually where people skip breakfast and then they have these, eating windows where they can have lunch and dinner and hopefully not snacks. We don't really consider those to be fasting protocols. Those are good. Those are just good protocols for maintaining good health,
Hmm.
maybe losing a few pounds. They're not really designed to treat insulin resistance.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily, there is some fasting benefits, but there's not a monumental fasting benefit of doing them. So I've lived, I've reversed all my conditions, and for the last decade, I've lived doing, 2 meals a day and have been perfectly fine and have
Mm.
only experienced greater health. So this is what we call a good maintenance approach to maintain good health. When
Mhm.
I say therapeutic fasting, we're talking about like alternate daily fasting. So
Mhm.
fasting all day, or fasting at least until dinner time, if not all day on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, for example. So you would either fast from dinner on Sunday to dinner on Monday, or you'd fast dinner on Sunday to breakfast or lunch on Tuesday. So we're doing a full day fast on Monday. And during that time, we encourage people to have plenty of water. They can have tea and coffee. They can have some bone broth or some low carb vegetable broth to get in some electrolytes. But that
Mhm.
is it. So we're really trying to suppress our insulin production throughout the day and try to get ourselves to become more sensitive to insulin by suppressing it and giving the cells a chance to heal and repair in order to reverse the metabolic conditions. And we find most people need to do this about 6 months to make significant progress in their reversing their diseases. Most individuals will come off of all type 2 diabetic medications, for example,
Yeah.
within 6 months, and then they don't need it again ever. They're not just maintaining with fasting. And I think that's what a lot of people think. And it's like, no, they go back to eating multiple times a day, but they don't eat, all of the fast food and
Yeah.
processed foods. And when they do, like I'm a very human person too. So, I don't eat pizza 3 times a week anymore, but a
No.
couple of times a year, I might indulge in a slice of pizza. But
Yeah.
what happens is I have a normal glucose response. So we are like, I have a hemoglobin A1C that is normal. And then when I do consume something like a piece of pizza, I have a normal glucose response, like a non-diabetic, versus in the past, I would have an abnormal glucose response. So we're truly reversing the condition. So these people are
Mhm.
not just staying in remission. What we're really doing is by suppressing that insulin, fixing that issue. And everybody's so concerned about stress on the body. And I get it. We're in a really sort of stressful place in the world. The world's
Mhm.
truly going bonkers. And with all of this stuff with COVID, I mean, I was just talking to someone this morning who said that she stopped watching the news 2 years ago because it was going to
Yeah.
kill her. So I understand our modern lives are super stressful as it is. And then just the sort of the state of the world's really wonky. So we want to be minimizing stress on our system But in terms of physical stress, there's a good type of physical stress and a bad type of physical stress. If we have no stress, our system deteriorates. If we have too much stress, our
Yeah.
system will deteriorate. So it's just like everything. Water is so important for our survival. We can go
Mhm.
so many days without water, we die. But if we
Mhm.
were to just guzzle and guzzle and guzzle water all day, we would internally drown from too much water. So
Mm.
everything that's good for us is bad for us in excess, just like not having any of it at all. And stress is one of those things. So this concept of finding the right amount of stress in medicine and science is called hormesis. It's
Mhm.
that, nice golden,
Yeah.
Goldilocks spot. So
Yeah.
we explain it to people like the gym, right? So say you're going to the gym and you want to build some strong bicep muscles, something
Mhm.
I'm actively trying to do because I don't know how I'm going to hold a baby. So I want to build some strong bicep muscles. If I go into the gym and I lift 1 pound dumbbells, I know I'm not really going to get
Right.
nice strong biceps.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not any stress. And if I go into the gym with not very strong biceps and I try to pick up 100-pound dumbbells, I'm going to injure myself. I might snap, crackle, pop, break something,
Right.
and I'm going to hurt myself. But if I pick up 25-pound dumbbells, I can do 6 reps,
Mhm.
start to feel a burn. I can
Mhm.
hit 10 reps and then be fatigued. I can
Mhm.
take a break and then I can do that again. So,
Mhm.
it's a good amount of stress. And that's what we're looking to do with fasting, because when you do the longer fast, you do activate your sympathetic nervous system, which is that flight or fight nervous system. And I think this
Yeah.
is where a lot of people go, that
Right.
means cortisol is being produced. But it's actually such a small amount of cortisol. And the intention of that cortisol being produced is to convert some amino acids in your system into glucose for when you're fasting. Most of our body can
Mhm.
fuel off of body fat when we're fasting, but
Mhm.
there's a small amount that does need some glucose, and the cortisol helps provide that. The other things that are produced from activating the sympathetic nervous system or these other counter-regulatory hormones. So cortisol is one, but we get noradrenaline and human growth hormone, and these are responsible for maintaining our lean mass and helping us burn body fat, as well as maintaining our resting metabolic rate. So this is why there's been a ton of randomized controlled trials since 2016 that have come out comparing alternate daily fasting, so 0 calories on
Mhm.
every other day, to calorie restriction diets. And the majority of these studies look at people for about 30, 40 weeks. And when they do the calorie restriction, they reduce their calories by about 400 a day. So they compare these two groups, and every single randomized controlled trial, a gold standard in medical research, has demonstrated that people who do alternate daily fasting burn more body fat, maintain more lean mass, and see no clinically significant change in the resting metabolic rate. Versus every study has demonstrated with these alternate daily fasts that in this group, the calorie restriction, they burn less body fat, they preserve less lean mass, and they see a clinically significant reduction in their resting metabolic rate. And the big difference is
Mhm.
because, when we're fasting, we do get these counter-regulatory hormones produced. So when we do the 24, the 36, these alternate daily fasts, these more
Yeah.
intensive fasts, we get these great things happening that we don't get during just sort of the time restricted eating, the 16-8 or the 18-6
Yeah.
approaches. So that's really, sort of what distinguishes the two, and is this counter-regulatory hormones. And the biggest thing with calorie restriction diets, you're just reducing your household income, right? So say something were to shift and your household income was reduced by 30%. Initially, you might overspend because that's a fairly big reduction. So you might go
Mhm.
into a little bit of debt, but eventually you would learn how to survive on 30% less income. You might get rid of one of your cars, take public transit instead. You might stop going to the movies and get a Netflix subscription. You might cancel, some of your services. Maybe if you had a home phone for kicks, you might say, I can
Yeah.
just rely on my cell phone. But you would figure out over the course of a couple of months how to stop going into debt. And you would be able to adapt. And then you wouldn't be in debt anymore. Maybe you'd even start saving again once you learn or where to cut costs.
Yeah.
That's what happens when we do calorie restriction diets. We're just limiting the amount of calories that you get by a certain percentage. So our body can still survive off of those calories. And it just cuts costs to cognitive function, respiratory function, reproductive function. And this is why people start to feel awful and develop issues when they do those long-term calorie restriction diets. But at the start, their body's overspending metabolic energy. So we do see a bit of weight loss, but then it acclimates and then it learns to save. And that's why we start regaining weight. And then it becomes infinitely frustrating. We feel awful. We go back to our previous way of eating and we gain all the weight back, plus some. The majority of people within 3 years of losing weight, 95% of them regain it all back, plus additional weight. So we're not really fixing the problem here. And so fasting, when we do these longer fasts, it's not the same as calorie restriction because we're not giving our bodies anything, or maybe we're giving them a cup of tea, cup of coffee. We're talking negligible caloric intake. So it can't function. So we do trigger this nervous system response, but then the nervous system response provides these great benefits. So say my resting metabolic rate is 2,200 calories a day. I'm like a 5 foot tall woman who's moderately active. So say it's 2,200 calories a day. Well, I give my body nothing, and then I activate this fasting system via my sympathetic nervous system. And it's like, okay, noradrenaline's going to come out. And well, Megan's got fat stores. So we're going to empty 2,200, fat store dollar energy to cover her amount today. And that's what all of the clinical research is showing. I mean, that's what we've seen clinically. We've worked with tons of people now. This is what the data is showing too repeatedly in these randomized control trials. So that nervous system response that we get so scared of, seeing that flight or fight system, it actually has huge, huge benefits. So it's a very positive type of stressor. I mean, if you're new, like when I grew up in Toronto. I was born in 1984. So I grew up with the pail of snacks to go to school to make sure I had something for every 30 minutes of the day, who came home to school, with food, and, who was encouraged to eat right before bed. So I wouldn't wake up in the middle of the night hungry. So all I knew was eating. So to go from that, you would never jump from that into a longer fast. You would start to work your way to getting there over time to give the body a chance to adapt so it doesn't become too stressful for the system. So, I worked first on cutting out snacks, and then I went to just 2 meals a day. And then I went to 1 meal some days, not every day, some days. And then I did some more of the alternate daily fasts. And you can take a slow and gradual approach to it. So it's not too stressful on your system, and that you're only getting positive stressors on it. So you'll see sometimes on the cover of a magazine, say at, your local market, when you're checking out, so-and-so did a 5-day fast. No one, you don't start there. You start and you build up so it gets gradual. Maybe one day I do want to be able to lift those 50-pound dumbbells. I don't start there. I start at the 25. Maybe I even start at the 15. And then I go and I do it consistently, and I get stronger and I get stronger, and I have to increase the strength. So we talk about fasting often being like a muscle. So we help people build up their muscle, get to where they need to be, reverse their metabolic syndrome, and then teach them good time restrictive eating and nutritional patterns to maintain good health.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that was a great analogy. I love that, lower income thing. That really makes sense and explains a lot about calorie restriction and how that's never works. So would you say, I mean, I've heard a lot about calorie restriction slowing your metabolism. Would you say time restricted, no, alternate day fasting, which is primarily what you do to combat insulin, would you say, could you actually claim that raises someone's metabolism?
Well, you could say that it maintains it. That's what a lot of the research shows. But the research that's being done, the randomized control trials that are being done, are people who have fairly normal resting metabolic rates to start with. Now, clinically, we see a ton of women who have done they're 52, they're 63. They've done calorie restriction diets since they were 8 years old or 14 years old. We know that their resting metabolic rate is awful. But what we find is when we add in a bit of a higher fat diet, and we couple that with some longer fasts, we do see them start to lose weight. They're slower to lose weight than someone
Mm.
who hasn't had a history of dieting. But eventually, after about 4 to 6 weeks, they're starting to lose weight like an individual who has never had a history of dieting. So we do know that their metabolic rate is improving some.
Mm.
Even one of my own team members, I think she started dieting in grade 5 or something like that. And she had her resting metabolic rate checked at the University of Toronto, and it was just awful. But her resting metabolic rate has nearly doubled over the years. So
Wow.
with I think with the proper nutrition and some proper fasting, and kicking that sympathetic nervous system into gear intentionally in a constructive way, that one can actually maintain their or increase their resting metabolic rate.
That's great to know, and y that's fascinating. I find that, it's sad. It's so sad at the same time, and we could do a whole I always say we can do a whole episode on, like, women and just, like, body image, and it's so sad to hear that, like, in grade 5, already doing that. Um, when you say added fat, like, I'm guessing it's, like, plant-based fats, like, whether that be more avocado or MCT oil and things like that. Like, is that something that you guys recommend?
Yeah, or like just natural fats too. So from the plant realm, you get things like the coconut fat. So
Mhm,
MCT oil is a type of coconut fat. You get olives and their oils. You get avocado and avocado oil. You get nuts and
mhm,
seeds are really good sources of plant-based fats. But we even recommend animal-based fats too.
mhm,
I love cooking vegetables in duck fat, for example, good
mm,
quality duck fat, or using beef tallow here and there
mhm,
is really great too. We don't shy away from grass-fed butter. We encourage people to, if they do eat animals, just to be mindful of the animals' fat quality.
mhm,
So if it's like, say, a grass-fed and grass-finished beef, then
mhm,
there's a good amount of a good balance of omega-3 to omega-6 fats in that. So we encourage people to, eat the animal fats so long as they fit their dietary profile. Certain individuals genetically can tolerate saturated fat better than others as well. I was someone who did really well coming off of my fast food diet onto some more natural saturated fats. And then in the long run, tended to lean more towards monounsaturated fats and omega-3 fats that are typically found in more of a Mediterranean diet.
mhm.
And that works really well for me. So, there's genetic components to it too, but we're not necessarily as concerned with saturated fats, naturally occurring, good quality saturated fats. So I eat things like duck eggs, for example. I'll have a couple of duck eggs cooked in some coconut oil, and that's
Mhm.
a great way to have some brunch on Saturday and Sunday.
Nice. Okay. I wanted to ask you, like, a couple things. I wanted to see, like, the type of biomarkers that you guys do at, like, yeah, like you're saying, we're online, so it's not a brick and mortar clinic anymore in Toronto. So I want to get some of the blood markers that you do there that you typically would not get at your normal, doctor's visit. I want to ask that, but why, Megan, do you think, I mean, like, you started, menstruating super early. Did you say 10? Or
Yeah, just before my 10th birthday. So it's just PCOS. That's what causes a lot of younger women to menstruate. We
but
have
but but
one.
but what caused the PCOS, though? If you look
Oh,
back now,
the
was
high
it your
the high
diet?
insulin diet. Yeah, oh,
Okay,
for
okay,
sure.
so you were overweight at 10.
I was a tofu, what we call thin on the outside and fat on the inside. I also had
Interesting.
fatty liver disease. I was tired, I was weak. I would, slip in the soccer field and break an arm without failure. I didn't have very nutritious foods, and I didn't have the
Wow.
energy to be active. So even though I weighed very little, my body composition was all body fat. It's in my adult life, I've weighed a lot and I've weighed very little. But an example that I like is that my present day weight is 124 pounds, but I have less body fat than I did at 97 pounds.
Gee.
So it's really about body composition. I wear a smaller pant size. I wear a size 2 at 124 pounds. I wore a size 6 at 97 pounds. So it's, or 4
Mm-hmm.
6 depending. So it's it has a lot to do with body composition. So I was very skinny on the outside, but my body composition was very weak. I'm very fragile, and was mostly fat.
Wow, interesting. And then how about exercise? Like how much do you I wanted to ask that too. Like if someone's like do you talk about exercising daily for these individuals that are you know,
Yeah,
yeah,
we're
yeah.
huge proponents of exercise. I mean, professionally, we don't get into it too much, but I think it's really great. I personally exercise quite a bit.
Mhm.
I'm doing these egg retrievals right now, so I'm more sort of doing Pilates, walking, hiking, nothing too intense. But prior to that, I did some form of exercise every day, and I did strength training 3 times a week. And in between these IVF rounds, I go back to my regular activities. And I've had some of my best weight training sessions, doing during intensive fasting periods throughout my life. It's more so glycolytic sports, like running for a marathon, you wouldn't necessarily do in a
No.
fasted state. But things like weight training are perfectly fine. Yoga, Pilates, body weight training, resistance trainings, all perfectly
Mm.
fine to do in a fasted state.
So and then the other thing too, so if you alternate day fasting, so we're talking 24 hours plus like it can be
Yeah.
okay, okay. And the first time you did that, did you feel like you couldn't do it? Like I think in general, like we should all, try that, even, whether we're insulin resistant or not, just sort of like to give the
Mm.
body like this whole idea that yeah, like sort of the primal, existence. But I mean, tell us what that was like for you.
It was tough at first. It felt like walking into the gym and picking up 25 pounds when I hadn't picked up anything
Right.
for
Like
a really long
I'm
time.
going to die. I'm sure you were saying.
It was not that bad, but
Okay.
it was tough. My thoughts at the time were consumed of food. I had to learn a lot of mindset strategies. I had to learn to focus on all of the great things that I never had time to do and how
Mm,
exciting it was that I had time to do them. Like I always would see these people going out for walks at lunch time,
mm,
in the beautiful months of the year. But then like I would, eat and then I wouldn't really have time and I have to get back to work. So instead of focusing on being the one not eating in my research group, I get to be the one that walks and gets to
mhm,
get that sunlight and that vitamin D when I have low vitamin D levels from living in Toronto. So
mhm,
you had to shift your mindset. You had to stop focusing on what you weren't doing and start focusing on what you could do. And that was a big learning lesson at the start. And once I was able to start consuming myself, I actually did my first full day fast where I skipped dinner by accident because
mm,
I had learned about this hot yoga class across the street from the clinic. And I just was looking at their schedule and I'm like, oh, tonight they've got a class at 6. I'm going to go to that. And
mm,
I wasn't even really thinking about anything. And I was just so excited to go to that because I had actually, I knew I had some clean gym clothes in my car. I'm like, I'm going to go, I'm going to do that. And then I get home and I'm like, oh, you know what? Like I didn't have dinner. Today was a dinner day. And it just because you start thinking about all of these great things that you get to do. So really, it was a more of a mindset shift
totally.
than a
Yeah.
physiological one.
Well, you're just kind of reminding me, like, as a psychotherapist too. I mean, we all want to focus on the things that we don't have or can't have, and thinking from a place of lack rather than thinking from a place of abundance, but these are all the things I should be grateful for, the minimalist little things that we just disregard every single day. Um and yeah. So okay, that's great. Okay, so how are the testing? And I know you're on a tight
Yeah.
schedule, so
Oh, no worries.
just tell
I
me I need to bail if you need to bail,
no,
but
no, absolutely. So the test that probably doesn't get tested the most, that's one of the more important ones, is just a fasting serum insulin test.
yeah, why doesn't that, Megan? Like why don't we get that at our daily or our yearly physicals?
It's so bizarre. I have no idea why. I can't tell you why. We were fortunate because we did start out in clinic in Toronto, and we didn't have any issues ordering insulin tests. Whereas versus like other provinces like Quebec, only certain physicians, like endocrinologists, can even order that test to begin with.
Jeez.
Primary cares or GPs, they can't order it. Same thing in Vancouver, British Columbia. They need permission to be able to order that test as a primary care, which is just all
Hmm.
like really kind of bizarre. I just don't really understand. So
How is
it's
it? Sorry, you're in the
yeah.
States, so is it? Oh, well, then that's a whole nother thing because it's
Well,
paid for. I guess you can get whatever you want, but yeah,
you can. So
yeah.
there's a lot of luxury here. I mean, if you want insurance to pay for it, you need a doctor to order it. You might have to run around in some circles if the doctor is not willing to, but there's always a way in this country to get it and pay for it out of pocket. So
Yeah,
I mean,
especially in California.
especially in California, but there's a lot of doctors here. So I recently started this new egg retrieval round, and I go to a group practice. I meet my doctor. We determine the course of action, but I might not always get him when I go in for
Okay.
appointments. But it's great because it's open 365 days of the year. And if I need a retrieval on a Sunday, people are there to do it. They're not trying to further manipulate my hormones to fit their work schedule.
Exactly.
So the doctor that I had on Tuesday when I went in for a baseline assessment, he said, "Your name sounds super familiar. What do you do?" He's like, "You're some that diabetes. I can't put my finger on it." And so I told
Oh,
him,
how
and
nice.
he said, "I don't know why we're not looking at the insulin. The insulin's the cause of all these issues." And he's like, "I tell all my fertility patients not to snack." He's like, "Of course you can't tell them when they're trying to get pregnant to do crazy fasting, but he's like, they can at least stop snacking and minimize the amount of time they're adding insulin when they've got a disease of too much insulin in the first place." He's like, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
why we're not treating this." And we had
Mm.
a conversation that was longer than my assessment about
Geez, how nice though. I
about it.
love it that your name is recognized there. That's great.
It's there's definitely in this particular area where I live. When I went, I had to see my first doctor here, and she was doing a medical intake. She said, "Do you presently have type 2 diabetes, or have you ever had it?" And I said, "Can you please define, what it means to have had type 2 diabetes out of curiosity?" And she said, "Well, type 2 diabetes is a reversible condition. We know that now. We know it's not a chronic condition. So people can have it. And then through lifestyle modifications, they can reverse it because they develop it through unhealthy lifestyle in the first place." So she said, so that is her question. And this is at this, quite a prominent medical facility in the Bay Area. And one that you would think it is very bureaucratic and abides by the standard of care, but the standard of care is starting to change in this area,
Mm.
which is just really neat. So hopefully we'll see that. I will say it's a lot easier in the Bay Area than it is in Canada, and Toronto was very progressive compared to a lot of major cities and areas in Canada. We could do quite a bit there,
Mm.
and just nowhere near
Mm.
the different regulations here. It's really cool to see.
So nice.
But then public private healthcare has got a lot of negative caveats to it as well. So you got to sort of pick and choose
Yeah,
your
yeah.
battles.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so insulin is a big one, but you also mentioned DHEA, and I'm guessing that's due to the, yeah.
So when an individual's with polycystic ovary syndrome, we'll look at all of the sex hormones, LH and FSH, and their ratios to one another.
Hmm.
Around what we think would be day 18 of their cycle. We'll
Yeah.
take a look at that. We look at their estrogen and the progesterone. There's different types of estrogen, so we'll look at estradiol and estrone, just see where they're sitting. But usually progesterone's a little bit low. In some cases, sex binding globulin
Hmm.
hormone is quite elevated, and
Hmm.
testosterone it's elevated because testosterone is so high. It's trying to lower testosterone levels.
Hmm.
DHEA S is usually quite elevated. So we'll take a look at all of these sex hormones in women.
Okay, and how about cortisol? I mean, like, but this is all blood tests. This is not like dried urine tests or anything like
Um,
that.
if you can get a doctor to do something like a Dutch test, that's really great.
Yeah.
So I find it, I'm very impressed with like Dutch testing.
Yeah, it
Um,
is very
so,
impressive. Yeah.
so work with a naturopathic doctor
Mm.
here. That's what my doctor orders, but
Yeah.
it's not necessarily the standard of care. So when we were in
Mm.
Toronto, we would do the blood work. But I'm a big fan of Dutch testing,
Mhm.
micronutrient
Mhm.
testing, do toxin testing like a
Mhm.
GLP tox or mycotoxin, organic acid testing.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of these more functional tests that I think
Yeah.
are very beneficial. We didn't do them in Toronto because we're sort of shell locked with what a traditional doctor could do within the confines of public health care in Ontario.
Yeah. Okay, so you're saying we as in you and your husband or just
I
we
know
as the clinic?
we as a clinic,
Yeah,
myself,
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
my business partner, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so yeah, because not yeah, people have access to that, but not they're also quite expensive, so it's not common to do
Yeah,
something like that.
we would do the blood test because it would be covered by the Ontario Health Insurance.
Okay, and so I'm gonna what one other quick question I had. Do you think a lot of young women PCOS goes missed because the physician might just say, "Oh, you're not menstruating. We'll put you on the on the pill."
I think that a lot of uh, a lot of people, traditional doctors, don't really know how to diagnose PCOS in the first
Yeah.
place.
Hmm.
And when anyone is having any irregularities with their period when they're young, the doctor just throws them on the pill. I mean, that's what they did to me. So
Yeah.
when
Oh,
I was
okay. So
younger.
you did go. Yeah, that's what I would have suspected that would have happened first.
Mhm.
Okay. So I and we should also mention we've talked a lot about type 2 diabetes, but Dr. Jason Fung also wrote a great book on cancer prevention. What's
Mm.
Why don't you just list the books that he has
Yeah.
written and you have co-authored with him, just so people can grab that if
Mhm.
they want to learn more about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So he wrote the obesity code, the diabetes code, the cancer code, the PCOS plan, the complete guide to fasting, and the longevity solution. He also has cookbooks that accompany the obesity code and the diabetes codes. So those are all available on places like Amazon. And
Mhm.
then we co-authored Life in the Fasting Lane together, and I have a book coming out next year, The Essential Guide to Intermittent Fasting for Women.
Wow. And this is the first soul like this is the first time
It's
you're
a
doing this on.
solo gig. Yeah,
Nice.
I have helped. So I do know my way around the publishing world at this point. So it's really great to get all of that experience and be involved in different levels for this project. It made it very easy.
Well, congratulations, Megan. And
Thank you.
I think this is really and then like I promise I'll leave you go. This is like a great time though. I think I can, right? The name of my podcast. I think like I mean, I look at you, you're young, 38, like, career is just flying. Did you ever think you'd be where you are right now?
It was always my dream to help people. And it
Mm,
became pretty disheartening in regular medicine. So I
mm,
always knew I wanted to help people get better, feel better. So in that way, it's not surprising. The method at what I do to get people there is very surprising.
yeah, exactly. Because what is your studies? Like, what did
I
your
studied biology, cellular physiology, with
yeah.
the intention of going, the mainstream medical route, and spending many years in clinical research. The goal was to try to find something that would help people, and well, it looks like I did, but it was just
Totally.
unexpected.
Right. You just landed in Jason Fung's lab. That sounds like.
Yeah, we started working together when I was very, very young, and
Yeah.
our we were kind of on the same trajectory. Mine because of my own personal health and my
Mm,
own desire to help people, and then he sort of came across fasting from a conversation with a friend, and then knew I had some health issues, and that was kind of it. That's how we got started.
wow, you were his first clinical study.
Yeah, I was ground zero.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'll let you go. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. And I wish you all the best in your journey of parenting
Oh, thank you so much,
and
Luella.
and your career. Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Thanks once again for joining me on another great episode of I Think I Can podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe below so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And until next week, treat each day like it was your last, because each new day is a privilege that we shan't take for granted. Cheers and have a great week. Bye bye.